Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome to this month's Trump in Review, or Month in Trump for July 2017. Now, there are three big things that have kind of blown up over the last month. Unfortunately, I did initially record this video the same time I recorded yesterday's video, but then Trump decided to continue doing what Trump does best and cause chaos, and as a result, I decided to first try editing stuff in, but that didn't really quite go to plan. My hair all fell out, as you can see, and as a result, I am now having to re-record this for a second time with all of the extra information in, just to try and make sure that I'm not, firstly, kind of caught out, and secondly, to make sure that we actually have everything that we need to talk about. For those of you that want to express your opinion or want to discuss this with me. But the first thing, the thing that caused me to kind of sit down and re-record this video, was one of the things that has been most substantial in and around President Trump and the White House towards the end of this month, and that is that he has decided to start ousting people, start reorganizing his friends, pulling in certain people, removing others. And so let's start at the beginning. First off, we had Anthony Scaramucci being brought in to replace Sean Spicer as the communications director and so on and so forth, to kind of shore up that role where Spicer had apparently not been doing a great job. And then on top of that, we've got other faces that have been brought more majorly into the picture, with, I think her name's Sarah Huckabee? Yes, Sarah Huckabee. Oh, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, sorry, correction. Who is the current press secretary as well. And we've got a lot of kind of movement in there to begin with. And now, previously, I believe it was last month's Month in Trump, I actually praised Scaramucci for the way that he handled the CNN article that kind of directly attacked him, and the way that he dealt with their apology and the way that he dealt with everything around that situation, I thought was fairly good. He actually seemed to have some level of class and decorum that made me think, okay, well, maybe this guy being on Trump's side isn't a bad thing. Unfortunately, then he's been brought in to replace Sean Spicer, who, granted, seemed to be very timid, seemed to be having a lot of trouble working around the things that Trump was saying. And this also brought a couple of other changes that were very strange, because now that Scaramucci has come in, first off, he started complaining about leaks that weren't actually leaks. They were public information that had just been pulled up and used. He started pointing the finger at people, most prominently Reince Priebus, but we'll talk about him in a moment. And he started raising all of these issues about leakers and about wanting to fire everyone in the communications department over leaks and all of that kind of thing. And he ended up kind of being on the point of a rather explicit attack. Priebus rather ended up being on the end of a rather explicit attack, as was Steve Bannon, from Scaramucci within the first few days of him taking on his role. And so as a result, I'm now thinking, well, this is firstly a bit odd anyway, and it's another example of me saying that Donald Trump is kind of running his presidency like a mob boss. You know, people are expendable, people are easily moved around, he's keeping his friends close, people he thinks he can rely on, or people who haven't disappointed him yet, moving into positions. He's continually reshuffling, he's being incredibly erratic in regards to the way that he's doing this. You know, and so as a result, you know, there's an example that this is a big example of that. But the thing that stands out to me in regards to Scaramucci himself is I can respect him in a way. He came from a middle class kind of upbringing. His father was a construction worker. He worked his way up through various businesses and jobs before he was able to set up his own company and kind of run with that through the last decade or so. And obviously he's done pretty well for himself. I believe one of the values, like his net worth that I saw, was somewhere around 85 million just by himself without any of his other assets and things. So, you know, he's done pretty well from a fairly modest upbringing, seemingly mostly by kind of throwing himself into leadership roles and developing himself from that in that kind of way from a very early age. But considering that now he is going to be the mouthpiece of the president, not that Trump really needs a mouthpiece considering he's got Twitter, Scaramucci coming out saying all these things, attacking people directly, it's a really unsettling kind of dynamic. And what makes it worse is that where previously people had to people in his position, most prominently Sean Spicer, had to refer back to the White House Chief of Staff, who at the time was Reince Priebus, after he was taken on in that role from where he originally sat as the head of the RNC. You know, now Scaramucci, as the communications director, only answers to the president, apparently. And he seems to very much tie himself to Trump as, like, his little friend, yeah? And whilst it seems a little kind of arse-licky, kind of sucking up to him, it's also kind of concerning to me that you've got Trump, who comes out with ridiculous things, and now you've got Scaramucci, who seems to, after demonstrating a level of class and decorum in regards to the dealings around CNN, seems to have just completely thrown all of that out the window and just gone wild in regards to attacking people. And, you know, that's a really strange and an interesting shift to me. And it's really, really kind of damaging to the White House to have this kind of roll around with people going, well, if we're friends with Trump, then once we get into a position, all we need to do is suck up to him and then we stay where we are. We're going to remove the people with political experience who have an element of knowing more about the people involved or what's involved, what we're doing, in favour of these business people that haven't dealt with this, are used to being able to say what they like and aren't usually held accountable for those things when they're just said behind closed doors at a boardroom. Now, though, we've had another shift, and this happened only a week or so after the appointment of Scaramucci, when Scaramucci pointed out that Priebus would probably, because he was a leaker and he was a terrible, you know, operative for the White House and so on and so forth. He was claiming that Priebus would kind of be removed swiftly or sometime shortly afterwards, and apparently that relationship between Trump and Scaramucci is demonstrated to be close, because then Trump comes out the other day and announces that Reince Priebus will be removed and pushed out from the position in the White House as Chief of Staff. And he's been replaced with the Homeland Security Secretary General John Kelly, pointing out again, though, the kind of this shift might be a good thing. You know, an ex-general being able to whip people into shape, organise, kind of shut down some of the leaks that they're apparently so worried about, even though some of them just aren't leaks. You know, those kind of things you might see as a good thing, but obviously, as with Scaramucci, we may very well see over the next week or next couple of weeks something go horribly wrong with General Kelly. But in regards to Priebus, again, the whole... I remember when Trump got elected and he called Priebus up onto a stage with everybody else, and he was doing the mob boss thing of pulling people forward, forcing them forward to kind of bend the knee, bow down to his now kind of omnipotent power, and admit that they were wrong and basically swear fealty to him. And it was a horrific thing to watch. I was sat there afterwards thinking, what the hell? I don't like Reince Priebus. I don't like the things that he says. He seems like a very slimy individual to me in the interviews I've seen with him, in the things that he said, and the things that he's done. But god damn did I feel sorry for him when Trump called him up. Because, yeah, he had supported other candidates. Lots of people had supported other candidates. It was a race, and that was the whole point. But then he got behind his man at the very end because he was towing the party line. And yet then you had Trump call him up and basically force him to say how happy he was that Trump won in spite of everything that had happened. You know, it was just cruel, I felt. And so now the way that Trump kind of addressed this was he had him stand forward with him and kind of thanked him and so on and so forth when they landed after a trip that they had been on. And he said that they had accomplished a lot and he was proud of him and whatever else. But the thing that stands out to me is that in all of that, he was saying that General Kelly was a great American, a great leader, and that's why they needed him. And that he had been a true star of his administration so far. And then he just went, Reince is a good man. That was it. You know, the most other things that he said was that they had accomplished an awful lot together, and that he was proud of Reince Priebus. But again, that's kind of condescending, considering that Trump himself has, when he says he's accomplished a lot, he's made a lot of noise. But as we'll see in a minute with the next thing that I want to talk about, the actual accomplishments of his party are and of him in office are somewhat small still. But yeah, so we've got this big shake-up. We'll obviously have to see whether or not Scaramucci regains that level of cool and calm that he had in regards to the CNN issue, and see if that pans out moving forward. But I don't think Scaramucci, considering he's seemingly very close to Trump, is going to get pushed out. The next person that might be up for the chop might be Steve Bannon, his one of his head strategists. But again, we'll have to see. But in regards to Reince Priebus and General Kelly, you know, we'll have to see if General Kelly does what he needs to do, if he'll be able to kind of wrangle in some of the things that Trump hasn't been happy about, or whether or not he stands there and goes, well, actually, no, these things that you're claiming are leaks are not leaks. They were public information that was requested and granted. You know, there's nothing illegal about any of this stuff. You know, whether we'll see that or not, we'll just have to wait. But in regards to Reince, I've not really seen anything that's, you know, really suggests where he's going next. You know, whether or not he'll head back to the RNC, whether or not he'll go and do something else, you know, we'll have to see. But I don't think we've necessarily seen the last of Mr. Priebus. And so as a result, you know, I really worried about where this instability will take the US. Mostly because, you know, we've seen instability in a lot of places recently, especially, you know, the UK with Brexit and all the silly bullshit that's happening around that. And, you know, we've seen it damage public services, increases in terrorist attacks, increases in crime. You know, we've seen all of these things develop in various ways due to instability, due to uncertainty. And Trump continually reshuffling his hand, you know, re-choosing his team, that's not going to be good for anybody. It's going to breed further instability. It's going to cause chaos. And, you know, when you've already got Donald Trump as your president, as your leader, I don't think you need more chaos. So, you know, I can only hope that General Kelly can actually kind of rein in what's going on. But then again, maybe he'll get removed if he does it too well. But we'll have to see. And, you know, it's all been very interesting to watch the last few days, considering that this actually started whilst I was away from my desk, away from my PC, away from the town that I live in. And as a result, I was out in the middle of nowhere, and trying to keep track of this was really hard. So coming back and being able to kind of almost binge watch the whole thing unfurl was kind of both entertaining and horrifying. But yeah, so let's leave that one there, and let's move on to the next big thing, next big blow to the unfortunate series of events that President Trump has rolled through this month. And this is where, again, I'm going to point out something that he would probably say is working towards an accomplishment, but again is not going well for him, and ultimately isn't really panning out. Kind of the same way that some of the elements of his immigration ban just didn't, and the restrictions that were then put on it when it actually passed. He's been attempting to repeal Obamacare, or the Affordable Health Care Act, for basically since the beginning, saying that Obamacare is dreadful, saying that it is damaging and all the rest of it. When the opposite is demonstrated, when even the people that have voted for him have come out in force saying that they don't necessarily want him to remove and replace, they want him to improve. And yet, because it was Obama's idea, even though before that it was Mitt Romney's idea, it's something that they want to repeal, it's something that they want to rearrange, and it's, as we talked about in last month's video, the things that they're actually trying to push through with it are much more towards kind of ensuring that the rich do well off it, and ensuring that the cover that is there doesn't last very long to appease the people, but not harm the interests of Trump and his friends long term. And so as a result, kind of rolling into this, they had gone back and taken a look at the new bill, or the old bill that was said to be too mean, too harsh, whatever else, and they'd slimmed it down once before, they now slimmed it down again, and now we've got this skinny repeal bill. And once again, it has failed to pass through the Senate. It was voted for on last Friday, and it kind of rolled through and hit the snag of a 51 to 49 vote against it, including several Republicans who just stood up and said, no, this isn't good enough, we're not going to kind of work with this, it's not great, and so you've got a lot of people kind of stepping forward and going, no, this bill doesn't work for people. This bill doesn't work for the people that actually voted for us. It doesn't work for the people who kind of wanted this to happen. It doesn't even really work for the people at the top if something goes wrong for them, And so, kind of, it starts now though that we've got this big question mark hanging over the whole thing, which again is more uncertainty. It's more kind of negative potential there than we really need, especially considering that when a huge amount of the Western world already has decent socialized healthcare, if not the best socialized healthcare, places like America, one of the most powerful countries on earth, kind of stepping forward and going, no, we still don't want it, no, we still don't want to work with it, even now that we've got some kind of groundwork to start moving towards a better system, we're not going to do it. It sends a big message out to all of those other countries. It either suggests that it's a country that's not going to work with people on kind of systems and ways of looking after their people, but also it sends a message to governments like the government over here in the UK at the moment, the Tories, who have been selling off large parts of the NHS and causing untold damage to the services it provides. It sends a message to them that this is all right, and that there's going to be someone that will back them up on their views once all of the poor people are sick and dying in the streets because they can't afford healthcare. And it's pretty horrific. And so the failure of these efforts to repeal Obamacare has now kind of set Trump in an odd position. Does he keep hammering his head against this wall, cutting bits off his bill, throwing it back out there, trying to make it work better? And as I said, a lot of the things that he's done, he goes, oh, we've achieved a lot, but there have been no, he's 6 months into his first year and there have been absolutely no legislative victories, when it's not even as if he's running up against difficulties by not having his guys be the majority in the Senate and Congress. He has the majority everywhere, and yet he still can't get a bill passed properly. He still can't gain the support for it. I mean, he's a weak leader. We've seen this. He's a child. We've seen that too. But even kind of tyrants and despots and man-children in the past have still been able to achieve things. Look at what George W. Bush did. And yet, Trump is showing himself up to be the weakest possible leader that America has had in a good long while, because he can't even gain any support for any one of his big bills. Yeah, and granted, the 51-49 vote was close. But the question now is, though, what happens next? Because if this has to go away, if this has to break down and they need to leave it in place, and this is obviously not something that is generally supported, then what are they going to do next? Are they going to take a look at ways to improve Obamacare, as has been asked for numerous times by the electorate? Are they going to look for another way to undermine these systems, maybe not purely based within the healthcare side of things? Are they going to look at other stuff around the kind of drug creation side of things? Are they going to look at pricing? Are they going to cut down on the certain limits that insurance companies have to go through over there to provide healthcare insurance? Are they going to potentially shore them up to make it even harder to get insurance for those people who, if Obamacare is already going to be pulled back at some point, the projections are 22 to 23 million people are going to be without it. And as said, you've got people like Paul Ryan coming forward and saying, well, if they don't have it, then it's because they're choosing not to have it. And you've got a whole load of other people blaming them for all kinds of other things. The people who can't afford it, it's the kind of irresponsible, disconnected view of people in power with money relative to the people who don't, and especially for the people who don't, who are working harder jobs, who are doing much more in the way of kind of physical labor or dangerous jobs even. They're the people that need this kind of healthcare available to them far more. And if the whole of any country is a pyramid, you have the largest group of people at the bottom. But if you start losing those people, if it starts getting chipped away, then everything else starts to crumble and collapse. We've seen this before. And so, looking at this again now, it's maybe not permanently prevented Obamacare from being repealed or kind of pulling it down and replacing it with something, but it does mean that you've got a really big gap here, because there's an August recess in the states for their legislative lot, and so as a result there's going to be this big gap between now and the next time that this can be kind of voted on. You're going to be looking towards the end of the year before this can really be looked at again. And when you've got things like their budgets and dealing with the country's debt, as well as other political issues around potentially even things like North Korea and international trade and whatever fallout there is on an international scale from other deals, you've got a really interesting kind of situation that Trump is now in. Does he continue to pursue this as kind of a white whale almost, even though he keeps running up against these problems, these impediments? Does he try cut it down some more? Does he try and put it into place in a different way? Does he try to rework the situation to gain more support? Or does he give up, turn his attention to things that are more important, that are more useful to him, that are going to actually maybe get him a single victory within his first year? There's just a lot there that he still needs to work with, and if he's not willing to make sacrifices, if he's not willing to look for kind of ways to move around it, then potentially he's going to end up without anything to do. He's going to be stuck in this limbo with this repeal and replace kind of situation without being able to move forward on it, without being able to gain support for it, without being able to develop the idea further, just because people won't give it the time of day. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is kind of sensitive to some people, but to me it's a very kind of black and white situation, but unfortunately the kind of black and white of it is still kind of cloudy and unclear just because there isn't that much information. And this is Trump supposedly talking to generals in the US military and coming to the conclusion that they need to ban trans people from kind of taking on roles within the military. Now, obviously there are lots of people screaming bigot and this and that and the other about this, and whilst I can understand that response, I don't feel it's either helpful or necessarily kind of warranted, because you've got a lot of people also, because Trump came out and said that it's all about cost, it's all about money, it's the healthcare, it's the upkeep of those servicemen and women who happen to be transgender, who require additional psychological care, additional medical care, as a result of kind of being in the military and what they do, in addition to how they live and how they want to live. And so, cost-wise, I can see what they're arguing. But again, the thing that most of the stuff that has come out on this has been, in the loudest way, has been Trump's tweets. And 140 characters isn't enough. Yeah? And let's face it, the contents of Trump's head isn't enough. And so let's actually take a look at this, because I've seen a few people throwing up memes and stuff like that going, we've got the full budget for the US military and everything else that's going on, and then we've got this tiny portion that is the cost of healthcare for these people. And it's like, okay, first off, let's not start trying to compare the price of a tank or a helicopter gunship to the life of a person. Yeah, because that leads us down a slippery slope where we're like quantifying people against things. And whilst I realise that's a kind of common practice, I would much prefer to talk about this purely in terms of healthcare costs if we're going to do this at all. And so looking at it though, we need to take a look at the full healthcare budget and for servicemen and women, and then you need to take a look at how much of a percentage increase it is if you add all of these costs for transgender individuals to it. Now, I've not seen those numbers anywhere, and I couldn't find any solid information when I was looking stuff up for this video. So, as said, whilst I feel that that's a kind of black and white argument to start making, Trump's argument with it doesn't have enough content to it, doesn't have enough information to it to actually allow us to either get behind it or get against it. And then on top of that, the information just doesn't seem to be anywhere in a solid way that it can be examined. And so that's the first thing that stands out to me. The second thing is that there has been some kind of research been done into this, but it's part of a 2-year or 3-year study. The same way that we had the study in regards to female servicemen or servicewomen rather joining male squads or working in their own squads in combat roles and things like that, and it was found that to a degree, rather unsurprisingly, female members of combat teams were not, for the most part, I think it was like 2% were, but then the rest of the female service women in this study weren't up to the same standard as their male counterparts. But it was found that, rather unsurprisingly, again, women have different strengths, and so you had women who were added to male combat teams, aiding in communication, looking out for each other, generating a more healthy and positive atmosphere around looking out for one another. And so you had an interesting improvement in performance when you had kind of a female member added to a majority male team or something like that, or how you had communication centers developing a much greater potential for success when you had more women involved. You know, it was a very interesting set of things that came out of it, but it did again kind of demonstrate, yes, sexual dimorphism again is a rather unsurprising thing, and as a result, women and men are not purely equal in every single way. And when you've got life or death situations revolving around a very aggressive and scary combat situations, you know, men have evolved to deal with those in a way that is much better tailored to those situations than women, but that doesn't mean that women don't have something to necessarily bring to those situations as well. Now, with transgender individuals, they're doing this investigation into the capabilities of these service people, the kind of assets that they bring, the weaknesses that they have, the ways in which individuals can continue their professions and things like that. And yet, less than a year into about a year, I think, into this investigation, into this study, we've now got Trump just outright banning all of it. And as much as he's arguing the money side of things, once again, Trump isn't providing facts, isn't providing information that can be examined. And so, considering that we've got no information on the monetary side, as much as it may very well be the case that it proves to be disproportionately expensive to care for those individuals relative to your average serviceman or woman, it does kind of stand out that there's no solid information on that, and as there's no solid information on that can be disclosed, then how can we trust that? How can we just take him at his word? Because so far Trump has been full of lies and full of exaggerations and full of complete bullshit. There's no reason for us to take that on board. But then let's spin it round the other way and take a look in the opposite direction, and we've got this study that's going on that they've not waited for the information from to examine. We can't take a look at it because it's a study in progress, and so as a result, again, we're not, there's no information either way to suggest that we get behind Trump or kind of ignore what he's saying and fight against it. And so, whilst I feel like this could be a very black and white situation where you literally just go, here are the facts. You can't argue with the facts. You can try and argue with the facts, but let's see how that works out for you. It's not going to get you anywhere. That kind of lead. If you did that, if it was done, then that would leave us with very clear arguments to pursue, be it either in favour of the ban due to whatever else it was, or being against it, and potentially seeing those things reflected in kind of other countries then also looking into these things, and potentially either improving or damaging their own armed forces or their own public services of various sorts along the way. We'd have to see how that panned out. But again, we've got no information on this. This is very much a kind of non-story if it weren't for the fact that Trump has come out and said this and he looks to enforce it. And then the last part that I want to kind of talk about here is the big what if when Trump actually puts this through in full and gets it enforced. Because what does that mean for the trans men and women who are already in the armed forces? Yeah, are we going to see them fired? What are going to be the circumstances of their removal from their positions? Are they going to have access to things like healthcare afterwards? Are they going to have options for retraining and development, or possibly moving into kind of tributary or subsidiary roles in other areas that connect to the armed forces but aren't actually either kind of on the ground kind of combat roles or support roles or anything that would potentially impact what they're seemingly worried about? There are those big issues in regards to the big situation, both for potential unemployment, for the kind of economics around it, and for the kind of way in which their armed forces work. But then also, let's think about those people. Potentially, some of those people have started transitioning as a result of the healthcare that they have gained access to through their role as a member of the US military. What happens if they then get removed from that? Will they continue to get support? Will they continue to get healthcare? Will they be able to? Will there be a way for them to apply otherwise? What about the people who were trans before they joined the military and proved themselves, and then have been able to take on various roles? I saw one article earlier this week or the other day when I was looking into this stuff at the end of last week, when I recorded this video for the first time, where it was a member of kind of the armed forces administrative body who was trans and who had come in being trans beforehand when they were in their 30s. They had transitioned in their 20s. They came in and they had proved themselves capable of doing the job. They had done the job now for like 5-6 years, and they were now worried that they were going to be ousted, and they wanted kind of certainty around this, as anyone would if they suddenly thought that they were going to be losing their job. And I've seen others as well where you've got kind of trans servicemen going, well, look, why don't you come and meet me? Why don't you come and see what I can do? You know, but of course, Trump isn't going to do that because he doesn't care. He's not invested in people. He's not even really invested in facts or figures. He's invested in himself. And so if he agrees with it or if he disagrees with it, he's just going to go ahead and do whatever. So the way to deal with this, I think, is not necessarily just to fight, because that happens all the time and it's easy to ignore. The thing that stands out to me is I think we need to sit down and have like greater investigation, more information, and more discussion around this. Because that way, if we get more facts out, if we get more information out, if it all comes to be something solid that we can examine, then it doesn't matter what Trump says, there he can go fuck himself, because whatever the actual matter of this situation is, you know, we can work around it then. You know, and as said, the reason why I want to make these kind of Trump in review videos or month in Trump videos is because the US, being such a powerful and prominent and noisy country, what they do tends to have a little bit of a ripple effect, at the very least, on other countries, on other places, especially in the Western world. And so, you know, we need to keep track of this, considering how unstable and erratic and chaotic Trump is. And, you know, where lots of places have been taking big steps forwards in regards to acknowledgement of kind of gay marriage and kind of ensuring that trans people are properly covered or in regards to various loopholes in kind of equality of opportunity acts and things like that, making sure that all of these things are covered. You know, we've had people going back over stuff, we've had people kind of new bits of legislation coming in that have made lots of people very happy. Sometimes we've had things overstepping, as with in Canada, where you've got the situation with Professor Jordan Peterson. There we go. But you've got Professor Jordan Peterson who's arguing over language use there, which I feel is a really stupid argument, and I have gone into this in various other videos in the past. But, you know, we need to keep track of what's happening with the noisiest kid around, because the rest of them are going to follow suit. You know, we see this already in numerous places where just because you've got Trump being so loud and getting so much support for kind of really cruel and unhelpful things, you know, we've got the British government doing the same thing. We've got people throughout the rest of Europe attempting to do the same thing, as we saw with Marine Le Pen during the French election. And so, you know, we need to kind of keep an eye on this, because just one thing that gets out of America and kind of floats across to the rest of the world, has some kind of support for it, could potentially lead to kind of pretty significant damage to the rest of the countries that are interacting with it. You know, it's one of these troubling things where you see someone who really isn't out to help people in a position where they are literally, I mean, the President of the United States is literally, again, as I've said about UK politicians, he's a jumped up civil servant. If he's not serving the civil interest, then he shouldn't be in that position. And yet he's going to stay there, and he's going to continue to reshuffle, and he's going to continue to try and remove healthcare from people. He's going to continue to try and limit people in ways that he doesn't really necessarily have reason to limit them. You know, you had people saying that Trump would be small government, and yet so far he has tried to do an awful lot of things that you would probably think would be big government. But anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think. Are there any other things that have happened in the US from a kind of governmental point of view that you think I've missed, or that maybe you think are more important, that you would like me to dive into at some point? You know, let me know. Otherwise, what do you think about these various things? What do you think about the kind of reshuffle of members of staff in the White House? What do you think about the kind of Obamacare, Trump healthcare thing? And what do you think about trans people being banned from military service, considering what's been said so far? As I've said, I'm not sure, because there's no information around it. There's no solid facts to examine, and the kind of monetary information, the economic information, doesn't seem to really substantially exist. And then the information that's come from this study that they launched is nowhere near ready. It's nowhere near finished, and we're going to be waiting for at least another year or so before we hear a thing about it, I would imagine, if not another 3 or 4 years before we actually see proper solid results that have been properly examined and worked through to find conclusions. You know, so let me know what you guys think. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you found this tool interesting or enjoyable, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.